In the previous video, we defined quartiles, and now I want to show how to use quartiles to determine outliers, or these extremely strange very high or very low values. To do this, I'm going to start with the idea of the interquartile range. The interquartile range is the spread of the center half of the data. It tends to be abbreviated by IQR, and is found as the third quartile minus the first quartile, so Q3 minus Q1. Here I have a data set, and I actually found all three of my quartiles in a previous video, but let's go ahead and do it again. We start by sorting our data. We can see that our median value is 9, so that would be Q2. The lower half, the median of this, would be halfway between 5 and 6, so Q1 is 5.5. The upper half, the median would be halfway between 12 and 14, so Q3 is 13. So for this particular data set, my interquartile range would be 13 minus 5.5, or 7.5. Now that we have the idea of the interquartile range, let's talk about outliers. Outliers are a value in the data set that appears to kind of deviate by a large amount from the rest of the data. These outliers usually occur because of a measurement error. In this case, we often just discard the data. Maybe the population has a heavily tailed distribution. In this case, we shouldn't throw away the data, but it will change how we use statistics. The rule of thumb for finding outliers is to find Q1 minus 1.5 IQR and Q3 minus 1.5 IQR. And this will give you a range of normal values. Anything outside of this range that we just found is going to be considered an outlier. Let's go back to the data set we were looking at earlier. In this case, we would use Q1 minus 1.5 IQR. We know Q1 is 5.5, and the interquartile range is 7.5. 1.5 times 7.5 is 11.25. So we get our lower bound is negative 5.75. We definitely don't have any numbers smaller than negative 5.75, so we don't have any lower outliers. So now let's check the upper outliers. Q3 plus 1.5 IQR. Q3 is 13 plus 1.5 times 7.5. So 13 plus 11.25, or 24.25, and we don't have any values bigger than 24.25, so in this case, this data set has no outliers. Let's look at another data set. We need to start by finding my quartiles, Q1, Q2, and Q3. And once again, I did this in a previous video, but let's go ahead and look at it again. Our median is halfway between 92 and 93, so 92.5. Q1 will be halfway between 90 and 91, so 90.5. And Q3, halfway between 93 and 95, or 94. In this case, my interquartile range will be 94 minus 90.5, which is 3.5. My lower bound, Q1 minus 1.5 IQR. Well, Q1 is 90.5. Minus 1.5 times IQR is 3.5. This gives me 90.5 minus 5.25, or 85.25. Well, we can see we do have a value smaller than 85.25, so 82 would be an outlier in this case. Let's see if we have any upper outliers. Q3 plus 1.5 IQR. We know Q3 is 94 plus 1.5 times 3.5. That's 94 plus 5.25, which would be 99.25. And so we do have a value bigger than 99.25. So in this case, we have two outliers. We have 82 and 105, both as outliers. 82 is a lower outlier and 105 is a higher outlier.